Hi, I'm Matt Page. I'm the author of the British Film Institute's book 100 Bible Films and also of the Bible Films blog. And a couple of days ago, I got to talk to Paul Syrstad, Eben Figueiredo, and Charlie Beaven from the forthcoming series Testament, which is a look at the book of Acts set in a modern day context. So let's go into what they had to say about the show.
Great. Well, thank you all for agreeing to talk to me. Really looking forward to really taking in the full kind of season of Testament. It's been something I've kind of known about for quite a while, so it's great to actually get to speak to you. I suppose, Paul, it'd be really interesting just to hear a little bit from you about, from the footage I've seen that the film's got a very distinct visual kind of look. It's kind of very kind of gritty and modern day. And I just wondered what your kind of influences were in terms of that particular, I guess, that visual look.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was so. I guess to tell the same story of the Book of Acts
Mm.
and to stay faithful to the text whilst bringing it in modern day, it needed some alterations to the modern day. Uh, the main central thing is that I don't think there can be a digital revolution and tell the
Yeah,
same story. Suddenly, the Paul's first letter to the Corinthians becomes his first draft of an email on Gmail to the Corinthians, and it just doesn't have the same kind of threat level as the analog world.
yeah,
So the analog world had to lead it. The digital stuff is like something that might happen in the future of this imagined world. And then architecturally we kind of landed on this very brutalist type world, really.
yeah,
Uh, and that was to double down on the Imperium regime, the oppression that was being felt. And so it was, but again, like when you go into the temple, there's hints of Art Deco. So it was
yeah,
allegory of something that once was and once had their own empire and once they had their own kingdom. But now, it's much more post-war style, brutalist, architecture. So that was kind of the inspiration for it.
yeah. It comes across as a really kind of interesting way of telling the story. And I wonder if you could perhaps yourself or even expand on that idea of the more kind of digital technology, because obviously that's very much key part of a lot of the New Testament is we only kind of have one half of the discussions and so on, and how I guess just some of those things inform that kind of digital world that you've retelling the story in.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch all of it. So I'm not, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I guess I was just saying in terms of that idea of the digital world and communication being via email or messages rather than kind of written text, and obviously we only have Paul's half of those conversations with the letters. How
Yeah.
that how you worked with that as a kind of idea and how in terms of forming the background to the story, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, in our at least our first season, we won't get into the writings of the New Testament until a little later on. So
Yeah.
I guess what we've done is planned season one for a multi-season show, to tell the story of Acts fully in, 5, 6 seasons. But thinking ahead, we have to make some really crucial decisions now.
Yeah.
Some of the costume choices, some of the architectural choices are so stylistic, so that when we go to different parts of the world, that anything that's not that will feel foreign, will feel Gentile in its
Yeah.
own way. So the same thing with the writing and the digital revolution. We wanted to create these boundaries that you would be very surprised to suddenly see somebody on a laptop in the Testament world. It'd be like, hold on, that doesn't look right. Um, so yeah, so it's setting some boundaries now. So hopefully later on, God willing, for future seasons, it can dwell in this space.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Evan, how did you prepare yourself for the role in terms of yeah,
Yeah, so obviously it's based on the Book of Acts. So I read through that. I was actually raised in church myself, so I grew up with a lot of ideas about what this character was. But I think for me, approaching any character, it's about trying to find the personal things within myself that relates to these characters.
Yeah.
And then also trying to potentially lay down what needs to be laid down in my personal life to be able to immerse myself fully in that. I know that there's some questions about Saul, whether he was celibate, whether, all of these different questions. And for me, it's about really, I guess method is a strong word, but trying to really enter in as much as I can to that character. And also just be confident in my choices, because I think, so many Christians and people around the world will have ideas on who this character is. And I
Yeah.
think for me, understanding how passionate he is, whether that's through for his anger or for his joy, I think was something that I really wanted to lead with and see what that evolved into, basically.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Charles, you've almost got the kind of opposite problem in a way. Saul is such a well-known figure. We have his kind of inner workings of his mind in some of the letters, whereas Stephen is much more of an enigma, I guess. Even though he's obviously the first martyr. How did you go about preparing for your role?
I think one of the great things about Stephen is that we all, well, if you know how he ends.
Yeah.
And telling the story in the way that Paul and Faith have written it, he is a joyous boy who gets so caught up with the passion and this new calling that he has. So yeah, for me, that is just the surefire way to play this guy, and I think it adds to the season, really, really well. Yeah, he's so passionate and so hopeful, and he has a lot of energy and it's very infectious, which is needed because there is some seriously dramatic and epic stories that are going alongside his.
Yeah.
He gets there, but in the early stages, you really want this guy to do really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how does I guess the early stages, how would you describe the early stages of your character emerging and developing? Because obviously he's best known for his for how he dies, but that doesn't make much of a character. So how does your kind of character develop?
I think he has this pull
Yeah.
in the first shot, really, in the first scene. And that is trying to comprehend that for myself, as I could only go to people, my friends of faith, and ask them about what that was like. But it was kind of hard to really find an answer to, because everyone that I know is religious, been brought up in that, but to have a completely new pull into something else is something else. And it's the idea of blind faith, which I think he is one of the first Christians who can believe and not see Jesus. That is an awesome thing that he has to go through, and he has to learn to accept it, and see the joy and the positivity in that. That tells me so much about him as a person. He is emotionally, spiritually so intelligent. So yeah, and we know that he's smart from how he communicates with his mother and the script and stuff. So yeah, Paul and Faith have written so much about this character in our scene. So for me as an actor, it's I've gone a lot more facts and evidence from their script than the Book of Acts. Yeah.
And following on from that, Paul, how in terms of the script, how have you? Obviously, you've got act there, but it's not a screenplay, and you've kind of obviously wanted to fill that out and perform the modernisation. How have you kind of gone about that? What else have you drawn on other than the kind of acts of text?
Well, what's fun is, so I got to do a bit of pre-work in terms of laying out how I wanted the first season to go, and then I got to sit down with Faith, my wife, and Kenneth, my brother-in-law, because we wrote it together. But I think when you read the Book of Acts, it's very easy to go, verse 1, for instance, person A is in place A, and in verse 2, person A is in place B, and they're 100 miles away. So things happened in the middle, and I think one of the best examples of this, where if you really study the text, you can find the implied drama and tension in it, is that the character of Saul, who obviously eventually will become Paul, he writes that he studied under the feet of Gamaliel. Gamaliel, he's a master of the law. He's a member of the Pharisees, an incredible man from the Hillel tradition in the Sanhedrin, and yet it's Gamaliel who defends the apostles when all 12 are arrested. And yet Saul, who's studied under his feet, becomes the chief persecutor of the church. So there's like, suddenly you go, well, hold on, if this is a real relationship,
Yeah.
there's something here. And I'm not going to, spoil what we imply and what we decide to imagine what might have happened, because watch the series, it is thrilling, those moments. But there's full of the whole show is full of these little bits. But for Stephen specifically, Stephen represents, because you're right, there isn't much written really about Stephen until he's named as one of the 7 deacons. But we've used Stephen as the way into the story. From a storytelling perspective, the problem with the Book of Acts is there are 12 main characters right out the gate. And it's like, so we needed to, so really we meet the followers of Jesus through Stephen, and we meet the temple through Saul. And so it's with these two that we develop the world slowly for an audience. So Stephen should represent like Charlie put it so well, that the person who does not know anything and first turns towards that call, like that is something special. That is something really hard and really different. It happens to people all over the world, but it's still mad. So that kind of, he is our introduction. He should be your every person who decides, hey, what is this faith about? He's the one who's going to investigate it in a positive side, and Saul is the one who's going to investigate it in a negative side.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess to how do you kind of feel that, what do we kind of gain from relocating it in the present day, telling the story that way rather than as a historical piece? I mean,
I've got loads of answers for this. Do either of you want to go for this one? Might be more fun.
I mean, yeah, I mean the obvious one is relatability. In terms of today in our world, there's so many different types of people who can relate to all of these different characters in a really unique and personal way. I think hearing your own vernacular or vernaculars that you hear on a day-to-day basis in our own worlds, I think naturally allows us to find a personal connection with it in a way that I think you can, obviously, with retellings that are told that are much more of the era. But I personally think there's something exciting because I've not seen that before myself. And so even reading the script, I was so excited to think, oh wow, someone like me could play a character like this. And what it does is allow an excitement to build, I think, not just for the cast, but also for the viewers. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, so just to add to that, I think it just adds in a layer of diversity to the storytellers as well. Going into this diverse world, this dystopian world, it gives us so much room to play and add to this source material that we've got and bring so much more flavor and excitement, I think.
Right. Well, thank you ever so much for your time. Really appreciate hearing it. Really looking forward to the series and all the best with it.
Thank you so much, Matt. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great. Well, that was a really interesting interview with those guys. Testament drops on the 8th of June, available on the Angel Studios website and on their app. I'll be reviewing it as we go along. My thoughts on episode 1 are already at my blog, the Bible Films blog. And if you'd like to find out more about the Bible on film in general, that's a great place to go. You might also be interested in my book, 100 Bible Films. Please like and subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.